Okay, today's examples are on solving two-step equations that have fractions in them. So some of you are a little uncomfortable with fractions, but there's no need to be nervous, okay? We're going to go through this step by step together. You're going to be able to solve this, I promise. So, 1/3 n plus 1/2 n. Before I can do anything with these two numbers, I need to make common denominators. For 3 and 2, we're going to use 6. 3 times 2 gives me 6. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6, so 1 times 3 is 3. So 2/6 n plus 3/6 n equals 50. So now I can add these up. 2/6 n plus 3/6 n will give me 5/6 n equals 50. Now, here's the tricky part. How do you figure out how to undo this? How do you undo 5/6 times n? Well, how do you undo multiplying? You divide. So I'm going to write out here divided by 5/6. And on this side, I'm going to divide by 5/6. The division on the right-hand side cancels out because those are going to undo each other. Any number divided by itself is automatically going to get you a 1. So right here, we have 50 over 1 divided by 5 over 6. So 50 over 1 times 6 over 5. When I look at this, I'm going to cross cancel before I go any farther. Nothing goes into 1 and 6, so those are going to stay the same. With 5 and 50, 5 goes into both of those. So 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 50 10 times. So 10 times 6 is going to give me 60. And then 1 times 1 is going to give me 1. So I get 60 over 1, which is the same as just writing 60. So n equals 60. Example number 2 looks a little different. We've got to distribute that 1/2 before I can do anything else on this problem. So I'm going to draw my arrow to show my distributing. 1/2 times 4n and 1/2 times 6. And I want you to keep in mind, multiplying by 1/2 is the same as dividing by 2. So 1/2 times 4n gives me 2n. 1/2 times 6 is positive 3. And then I'm just going to write equals 25 because it's out there on the end. I want to keep 2n together, so I'm going to circle it. How do you kick out plus 3? Or how do you undo plus 3 or positive 3? It is a minus 3 on both sides. And I am left with 2n equals 22. Well, at this point, how do you break up 2 times n? How do you undo that multiplying? Well, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. 22 divided by 2 is going to give me 11. So n equals 11. And we do have several examples. We're going to do 8 examples with these fractions today to make sure you're really confident in yourself. This first one, I have negative n plus 1/3 equals 2/3. Well, I want negative n by itself at the very end. So how do you kick out plus 1/3 or positive 1/3? It's going to be minus 1/3. And we're going to subtract 1/3 on both sides. I'll dot the line for you. 2/3 minus 1/3 is going to give me 1/3. So I have negative n equals 1/3. Now, again, what number comes between the negative sign and the 1 if you don't see it? There is an imaginary 1 there. So it's really negative 1n equals 1/3. So how do you undo multiplying? We're going to divide by negative 1. And on this side, we're going to divide by negative 1. which makes this side look really weird. So I'm going to rewrite it down here for you. And it is 1/3 divided by 1 over -1. Well, -1 over +1. So how do you divide fractions? 1/3 times 1 over -1. And you're going to end up with negative 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3. So n equals -1/3. And you can't get that. Give me 1 second. So n equals -1/3. Number 4, I have n minus 2/4 equals 1/4. Well, I want n to be by itself. So how do you undo subtracting 2/4 or -2/4? It will be with a positive 2/4. So I'm going to add 2/4 to both sides. Now, lucky for you on this one, we were really nice to you. We already gave you common denominators, so you're just going to add.
Ramsey, call 227. Ramsey, call 227, please.
Sorry for the interruption. Just a normal day here at school. You get to hear all kinds of announcements. So, 1 plus 2 will give me 3 over 4. And then on the other side, I was left with n. So, n equals 3/4 is my answer this time because I've put everything together I can, and I was able to get n by itself. So now we're going to look at a few more examples and keep going for a little bit. 1/3 n plus 3/5 equals 4/5. Well, I'm going to circle my 1/3 n because that's what I want by itself at the very end. So how do you undo positive 3/5? We're going to subtract 3/5. We're going to subtract 3/5. Again, we gave you common denominators this time. 4/5 minus 3/5 is 1/5. So 1/3 n equals 1/5. Now, how do we undo 1/3 times n? To undo that, we're going to divide by 1/3 on both sides. How do you divide by a fraction? You're really going to say 1/5 times 3 over 1. So I'm left with n equals 1 times 3 is 3. 5 times 1 is 5. So n equals 3/5. Example number 6. We are almost done, I promise. All right, so I'm going to circle my -2/7 n because I want to get that by itself. So on this one, we need, how do you undo minus 4/14? We're going to add 4/14. Add 4/14 to both sides. So I am going to write this right here. So we're trying to do 4/7 plus 4/14. Well, the first thing I need to do is make common denominators. A common denominator for 7 and 14 is 14. 14 doesn't change, so that 4 doesn't change. 7 times 2 is 14, so 4 times 2 is 8. So now I'm able to add 8 plus 4 is 12 over 14, which we can simplify to 6/7. So when I write it right here, I'm going to go ahead and just write 6/7. And I have -2/7 n equals 6/7. Well, how do you undo multiplying? We're going to divide by -2/7. And remember, dividing fractions, you change it, and flip it. And like I've told you on previous problems, I like to cross cancel. I want my answer as simplified as I can make it before I get to the end. 6 and 2. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 7 and 7. 7 goes into 7 1. 7 goes into 7 1. And I get 3 over negative 1. So I'm going to have n equals 3 over negative 1, which is the same as saying negative 3. So n equals negative 3. We are almost finished with these. We have 2 more that we're going to look at together before you try some. So, on this next one, we have negative x over 7 minus 2.5 equals 1/2. So what we've got to do first is we need to add this. Well, we want negative x over 7 by itself. So to undo minus 2.5, we're going to add 2.5, and we're going to add 2.5. Now, when I get right there and I'm trying to add, and I have a fraction, and I have a decimal, I want you to remember that that's 1/2 plus 2.5 is the same as saying 2 and 1/2. 1/2 plus 2.5 is 3. So we have negative x over 7 equals 3. Well, this 7 on the bottom is causing me an issue. So how do you undo dividing by 7? We're going to multiply by 7 on both sides. These cancel out, and I'm left with negative x equals 21. Now, just like we've talked about on other problems, there is an imaginary 1 between the negative sign and the variable if you don't see a number there. So how do you undo negative 1 times x? You're going to divide by negative 1 on both sides, and we have x equals negative 21 as your answer at the end. All right, you have made it to our last equation with fractions. We have 1/4 minus x divided by 6 equals 6.5. So I want negative x divided by 6 by itself at the very end. So how do you undo positive 1/4? Or how do you kick out a positive 1/4? You're going to subtract 1/4. Those cancel out. So just like on the previous problem, we're dealing with decimals and we're dealing with fractions. So I've got both things going on over here. It does not matter if you choose to make it a decimal or a fraction. Since I made the last one into fractions, I'll make this one into decimals for you. So it would be negative 6.5 minus 2.5. So negative 6.5 minus 0.25 will give me negative 6.75. So negative x divided by 6 equals negative 6.75. Well, this 6 on the bottom, this dividing by 6 is causing me a problem. So we're going to multiply by 6 to get rid of it. Those cancel out. So we would have negative x equals 6.75, that's a negative 6.75, I'm so sorry, times 6 is going to give me negative 40.5. We're almost finished. So what number's between the negative sign and the x? There's an imaginary 1 there. So negative 1 times x, you'll divide by negative 1 on both sides. And you'll be left with x equals 40.5. Now, there are several ways you could write this answer. You can leave it as positive 40.5. You could tell me that x equals 40 and 1/2. You could tell me that x equals 81 over 2. Any of these are acceptable answers for this equation because at the end of the day, they all mean 40.5.